Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a comprehensive guide on Hexaorb Aquamarine. This deck just got new support from DBT10 Dragon Masquerade. Much needed support for this archetype, and yeah, this is such a fun deck. I hope you guys pick it up, maybe borrow from a friend and try it out. This deck has a lot of things going for it. So we're just going to go through the deck, how it kind of works in the metagame at the moment, and a few choices for your preferences, I guess. If you guys need any coaching, feel free to hit me up on Metafy. I'll post a link in the description. BCS season is coming up hot, so feel free to book a session and we can get started on your season. So the ride line, we are starting with the Hexaorb ride line. Now this ride line I actually don't really like. The only problem is that when it's rode on by Pentagleam, it needs to CB1. The problem with that is that at the moment, the meta is super quick and you don't really want to use this, well, don't want to take early damage, which means that you don't really want to use the CB1. But we don't really have a choice. So when the the Favneo, the Graham Grace decks come out, I think the ride line changes to the Graham Grace ride line because the payoff is the same. You still draw one, but with no cost. We're still playing the Hexaorb from DBT1 because we still need to Persona Ride, and this is still a good grade 3 to stay on as grade 3 because you can still pump your rear guards by 10k, and sometimes, you know, you hit 2 crits and you just win. Whereas if you're starting on the Aquamarine, then you're actually not doing anything. So staying on grade 3, the Hexaorb Sorceress is fine, which means that in your deck you have more Persona Ride targets as well. So yep, that is the ride line. Then, just as I spoke, we run 4 Hexaorb Sorceress Aquamarine. This card is crazy. It is regarded as Hexaorb Sorceress, and then pretty much it gets 1 drive and all your triggers become 20k when you Persona Ride. And then when you trigger check a trigger, you can Soul Blast 1 and stand a unit. This is crazy because in conjunction with some of the other cards that are available in the set at the moment, you can manipulate the top card of your deck super easily. And yeah, checking triggers is, yeah, super easy. For someone like me who never checks triggers, this deck actually does the job for me. So yeah, that's that. And then we play 1 Chalice because we need more Persona Rides. This deck solely relies on Persona Rides, so the more targets we have, the better. Then looking at the grade 2s. So the grade 2s, we run 4 of this new cycle card. This cycle card is pretty crazy. It allows you to essentially keep your hand up in the early game. So if you're ditching it for your ride line, you can just Soul Blast 1 because you barely use Soul in the early stages of the game anyways, to draw 1. But mainly it's when you Persona Ride CB1, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put 1 into hand and then the rest on top or bottom. So you can manipulate the top card of your deck really easily, but mainly this card is just literal free advantage. Really, really strong card and probably an amazing card going forward for the standard format. And then we have this grade 2. I think this came from one of the previous sets, Octaray Sorceress. So TLDR is Counterblast 1, top 2. If you add both of them to hand, you put 1 to the bottom deck, but if you add 1, you can put the last one on top or bottom. Yeah, this card is just really, really strong. It's a 25k attacker when you Persona Ride, and yeah, this card actually makes your hand way better. There are times where like your hand is just full of 5ks, so sometimes you can just bottom deck stuff and then yeah, just make your hand much better in terms of the quality of cards in your hand. The good thing about this deck is that the deck doesn't shuffle, and that means that, you know, towards the end of the game, generally you finish with about 25% of your deck left, which means that the 25% is full of normal units anyways, because you would have trigger checked everything anyways. So yeah, very, very strong card. Probably one of my favorite cards in this deck. Whenever I see her, I'm like really, really happy to see her. Then we have a new wizard that came from DBT10. So Effulgent Wizard, when this unit attacks, if you have a Sorceress Vanguard, look at the top card of your deck. If your Vanguard is stand, you can put it into Soul. When your drive check reveals a trigger, this unit gets 5k. So essentially, again, manipulating the top card of your deck. There is actually another card in this deck that makes this card really good, which I'll explain in a sec. But yeah, essentially it's just more cards to check top, and then yeah, it gains 5k when you trigger check a trigger unit. Then we have 3 of this old cards, so Quadric Cast. So when it's placed on rearguard, look at top 2 cards, rearrange them in any order, and then soul charge 1. So rearrange them, put them back on the top, and then soul charge 1. So you're essentially scrying for 2 cards, and then soul charging the card that is not the trigger. This card is really, really strong. I think probably one of the best cards in the deck, but because it doesn't gain power and it sits on 10k, we're only playing 3. Then we're playing Perfect Guards, Elementaria. If you don't have Elementaria, just swap it for a Keta PG. And then we're playing, so this bit is a little bit weird. So I'm playing a 3-3 split of Lala Rita and Replenishment Angel. I know a lot of people really like this card, but I feel that one trigger check means that you can restand 2 units with Lala Rita, which means that, you know, you essentially always get 5 attacks. And then Replenishment Angel, it's a CB1 to look at top 2 cards, put them all top or bottom in any order for a CB1. So actually, this is the same role as this, but this essentially has less effort. The reason why I say these 2 are kind of the same is that you can rearrange the top 2 cards, right? And then you hit 2 triggers, which means that you're like pretty good, right? Because you're Soul Blasting 2, and then you're restanding, which is a cost of Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1. But this, right? This is also Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1, but only needs 1 trigger. So which means that this has less dependencies on checking triggers. And if you check this and you check 1 normal unit, you're gonna feel really bad. So hence why the 3-3 split. I actually think sometimes you might be going 4-2, just because, yeah, because of that fact. The good thing about this deck is that essentially you can probably swap these to 4 Lala Rita, and then you have 2 flex slots. So these 2 flex slots can be like Refruzos, Grey One Maple. There's just other cards that you can run. I kind of like the 3-3 split because sometimes I like manipulating the top card of my deck after my Vanguard attack, which means that, you know, I can hit defensives or whatever. So yeah, that's that. So for triggers, we run 4 heals. You can run the crit heal. I think this meta calls for it with Gandiva and Eva, I guess. So crit heal is always good. And then 8 crits. We're not running the effect crits because this deck actually has no soul problems. And if you do have soul problems, then you have Octaray and him to essentially fill your soul. And then 3 fronts. This deck, if you check a front, it's actually super lethal because it's 20k to your front row, which is pretty cracked. Yeah, which means that like all your solo restanding rearguards off like your Lala Rita, your Hexaorbs are swinging for like 55k unboosted, which is actually ridiculous. And then OT, because OT is OT. The good thing about the Keta OT in this deck is that if you check the OT, then you're standing rearguards anyways, which means that you will always get drive checks off this. There are decks in the metagame at the moment for Keta where you stand rearguard and you feel pretty bad. Yeah, so at least this deck can stand rearguards and then you can drive check, whereas there are other decks that only stand like 1 rearguard and get like 1 singular drive, then it's not really worth it. But this deck, you pretty much stand like all your 2s and then check. And the good thing is that it procs Hexaorb Sorceress's 20k because all triggers become 20k as well. The only problem is that you can't attack a rearguard with a rearguard and then check a trigger and look to restand because the restand only works when she attacks. So yeah, that's like the one caveat, but I mean, you know, that'd be pretty busted if it worked that way. So just for some changes, like I said, these three, one of them can be Lalarita to bump her up to 4. I think Lalarita is a really, really strong card. Otherwise, some other options would be the grade 1 Maple. This deck focuses really on, Persona riding, so you can actually put the grade 2 Maple as well. And then, yeah, so pretty much, you can swap it for like the 3 replenishment angels. I think the grade 2 slot and the grade 3 slot is like a must. I think there's very little flex slots. I think the flex slots come in the grade 1 slot. So you can put in grade 1 Maple as well as Refruzos. Because if you're putting this on the side of a rearguard that you're restanding, so this restands as well. So that's like another option that you can put in. Obviously, if you're putting this in, which that means that you're running more grade 3 counts. And sometimes in the mid game, you'll find that, you have too many grade 1s. So too many grade 3s, which means that your hand is like super clogged up. So yeah, I guess that's like one of the things to look out for. But otherwise, yeah, that's another option that you could use. Let's just say, you don't have the cycle card. You can also run more copies of her. Obviously, that's like a budget option. I know the cycle cards are really, really expensive at the moment. So having more ways to just check top cards is really good, because the more cards you have to check top means that, you're getting closer to triggers for Aquamarine's restand skill. And yeah, that's pretty much all of the little flex slots. So how does this deck go into the metagame at the moment? So in the mid game, it struggles because of its low hand count. And if you're running draws, then you're not really checking double triggers, because you need to manipulate it so that the top 2 cards are a draw and a normal unit. So steer away from draws. And all the cards in this deck only check top 2 outside of the grade 2 ride line. So the only optimal time where you would hit the draw would be on the grade 3, because everything else checks 2 instead of 3, which means that you're only really checking for 1 trigger. And for a deck like this, it is really not good enough if you're only checking 1 trigger, because you're not maximizing on Aquamarine. Going into decks like Gandiva, this deck is very minimalistic. Because this deck commits very minimal cards, against Gandiva, this deck actually works slightly better, because if you're committing very minimal units and if you're getting rid of cards like Lalarita, then that means that Gandiva can't maximize on Best Harvest as well as some of the other cards in their deck. The good thing is that you don't really commit stuff early against Gandiva, and when you're riding to grade 3, you can like commit 2 rear guards and then pump them with Hexaorb, and then pretty much they get rid of it anyways. So you're only like giving them +2, but your numbers are actually insane. So that means that you're pushing them on high, like 2 high damage, and then you ride into Aquamarine and then just keep bashing them in the face. You really want to maximize on Lalarita, because then on the next turn they're only going to get 2 retires, because you're only ever going to play 2 front row. So that's like one of the ways to beat Gandiva. Play very minimalistic, but output as much as you can. Now against something like Messiah's, there's not really much going for Messiah. You just do your own game plan. There's not really much that you're going around with. As long as you're checking 2 triggers on each of the Aquamarine Persona rides, then you're, bing chilling. But otherwise, that's pretty much Messiah. Other ones like Eva. Eva's a little bit hard because it can farm PGs, but it can't farm PGs fast enough. So that means that in the early game, you want to like commit early stuff like your Octarays and this guy, and just bash for 3 lines on grade 2. Once you get to grade 3, again, you want to play your Lalarita and then have 4 attacks. And then on your Aquamarine, you pretty much amp it to 5 attacks with insane power. Make sure that you're always checking 2 triggers. Pretty much at that point, like I don't think any deck is living. So that's like a way I guess you can play into Jet as well. Jet, play early stuff. So like play this, smash them early. And then when you get to grade 3, start pumping up stuff, and then 5 attacks from then onwards. And then, you know, this deck, you have to be very careful with how you heal. Sometimes people make the mistake to attack this at the wrong time, which means that they deny their own heal. And healing with this deck is actually really impactful because the deck itself doesn't actually gain much advantage other than through this and this. So you really want to spam these two just because, you know, it's literal free advantage and you really like that. But otherwise, yeah, the deck doesn't really gain too much hand in itself. Then how does this deck kind of go into some of the other rogue decks? This deck actually just plays itself. So just play as normal. You really want to commit early stuff, and then pretty much put your opponent to high damage, and then finish off with Aquamarine, and then yeah, that's pretty much the game for you. So in the early stages of the game, when you're riding up to grade 1, the first damage is you always take the first damage, right? Because you always want to use it for your grade 2 re-ride skill or on-ride skill to draw 1. That's one of the problems I see with this deck, is that it's taking early damage and sometimes you can't just drop a 15k for no pass. So changing the ride line to something else would be better, but for the meantime, we'll play the Sorceress ride line. So when you ride to grade 2, you know, you CB1, you draw 1. And then on your grade 2 turn, you generally want to play stuff like your Octarays, just because it turns all your like 10k into 20ks. And what I mean by that is, let's just say I play this here. Let's just say this looks at the top 2 cards and sees something like Lalarita and the crit. So you put the Lalarita on top and then you soul charge 1, right? Which means that the top card is a trigger, which means that you can go 10. If your opponent hits a defensive, then this attacks, and if your opponent doesn't guard, then you're flipping the crit and putting all to the Vanguard. But then if they guard, then you're putting the crit onto the rear guard, which means that they still have to guard that anyways. So that's like one of the niche things about this deck, is because you can manipulate the top card with this card early on, because you only need a Sorceress Vanguard and you will always have the Sorceress Vanguard. So this is really, really useful. Because then you can push for early damage, yeah, super early. Like pretty much this turn here, if you can get maybe like even a booster behind this, right? This is 28. 28 is actually ridiculous, because it's just so strong. And against 5k because you check the trigger, so it's 33 with a crit. Your opponent's not guarding that, right? Unless they're facing a PG, unless they're facing like 30k shield. Like that is that's a 33 column. 30k shield in the early game is asking for too much. So pretty much you're attacking for 10, 33, really, really, really strong numbers. And then otherwise, if you're attacking into an 8k, 10, 10, and 18, that's like perfect numbers. When you rise to grade 3, all you really need to do is like, I don't know, play this, and then you're attacking with like this to your opponent's 10k Vanguard. And if it's a 10k Vanguard, you don't actually even need to commit this. So you just go 10 and then Hex, this next, and then Hexaorb. Or alternatively, what you could do is you could go this side first, and let's just say, you know, you took like another damage or whatever. So you attack with this side, attack this, and then you check a trigger, and then you can use the Countless One Solas 1 skill to restand this. And because you give 10k, so you give 10k from the trigger and 10k from Hexaorb to this unit, so they're both attacking for 20k, which is a magic number on grade 2s. Making magic numbers in this deck is actually really important, because you want to always maximize on, you know, hitting over defensives, and that's really important in the early game. Once you get to, say, Aquamarine, right? You Persona Aquamarine, this is going to get triple drive, and it's going to change all your triggers to 20k. Then that's when you start to, you know, you can play Lalarita if you want, but Lalarita is not really needed now. If you're playing stuff like this, right, you want to play it on the rear guards. The good thing is that this is no longer a, you know, 15 or 25k to pass, because each of your triggers are 20k, so they actually have to guard 30k more. And this has triple drive as well. So pretty much this is equivalent to a stride, right? And it gives just as much power as a stride. And it also provides Persona Right every turn. So this attacks for what? 28. Then you manipulate the top card of your deck, and then you can go this side, and then this, you check 2 triggers out of the 3 checks, and then you're restanding these 2, and these 2 gain insanely high power. And there, that's pretty much the ways that you would play Hexaorb. So I think in hindsight now, bumping up Lalarita to 4 is actually really strong, because it means that you have to check less triggers to get restands. And you know, sometimes if you're like me, you get super unlucky and you never check triggers, you know, Lalarita makes this much better, right? Surely in the top, you know, 5 or 6 cards that there'll be a trigger, right? You know, you pray for that. And if you do, then good. Then that means that Lalarita will be restanding 2 units. Well, with conjunction with Lalarita. So Lalarita will restand 1, and the Hexaorb herself will stand 1 as well. So yeah, that's pretty much the lines of play for this deck. Very, very simple. Always mulligan for your Persona Ride. I think that's probably the most important thing. Always find your Persona Rides, and if you don't, then you're going to be in a bit of a pickle. But you always want to find the Aquamarine first. Aquamarine first, and then find the Chalice after, because you always want to be on an Aquamarine Vanguard. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this Hexaorb comprehensive guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys did, pop a like, comment down below what you guys think of this deck. Have you played against this deck? Is this deck like super annoying to play against? Because for me, I have played against this deck a few times, and it's, yeah, a little bit awkward to guard. So which, you know, gives this deck an edge. And subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.